everybody. Welcome into the latest edition of the Pokescast, production of the Casper Star-Tribune and Pokes Authority. I am Davis Potter, Wyoming beat writer for the Star-Tribune, and I am joined by former Wyoming beatnik and my sidekick, Brandon Foster. Brandon, are you staying warm up there in Casper?
Yeah, it's practically tropical up here, it sounds like, compared to the rest of the U.S. right now. Yeah, I don't think it sounded like it wasn't actually quite as bad down in Laradise as it had been up here. I don't know. We had like 5 straight days of, peaking at -2.
Yeah. Well, it's been like -8, -10 down here. So,
okay.
At a certain point, it just gets so cold that it doesn't really matter. You just become numb at a certain point, So I think that's sort of what we're dealing with down here. But yeah, I mean, I guess we're in a much better situation. Can't complain that much when compared to what Texas is dealing with right now with some of the power outages that I'm reading about.
Yeah, so. At least the power's on. Yeah, and I mean, I think at a certain point I just stopped going outside, so it doesn't make that big of a difference what temperature it is one way or the other, except when I'm letting the dog out. So
yeah. Well, our technology is working good enough for us right now. We're actually able to record this, so I think we're better off than a lot of other people. But Brandon, let's just go ahead and dive into this, and we'll start with some basketball because while I know the Boise State Utah State series that's being played this week is getting most of the attention in the Mountain West, and rightfully so, considering the postseason implications for those two teams. There's a pretty good, or wild, or crazy, or at least entertaining, whatever adjective you want to use, game on Wednesday night down in Colorado Springs between Wyoming and New Mexico. The Cowboys end their 4-game losing streak by beating the Lobos 83-74 in overtime in the first game of that series, and Wyoming did it without having its head coach for the last 26 minutes of that game after Jeff Linder got ejected late in the first half, and nobody really knows why or really, I guess, what he said or did to get the hook that fast. But yeah, entertaining game regardless of how you look at it.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were both itching to get back out there, but good on them being able to pull a win out against a team, at least on the standings, that looks like a team you should beat. I'm guessing New Mexico's a bit of a wild card with everything going on this year, but yeah, it sounded like I guess not having covered Linder, were you surprised to see that, or what's his demeanor typically like on the sidelines?
Well, those were his 3rd and 4th technicals of the season. So, okay. Yeah, he's a pretty animated guy on the sideline. So I mean, it's not a shock that he picked up a technical. I think the bigger surprise was the fact that they came, consecutively in that moment, and then before you knew it, he was gone. And I know that they didn't get to the arena there in Colorado Springs, until like 20-25 minutes before tip because of some of the weather that they're dealing with down there in Colorado. Mm-hmm. So, and according to Wyoming's radio crew during the broadcast last night, Linder wanted the officials to give them a little more time to warm up, and apparently they weren't granted that. So apparently he was already sort of miffed going into that game because of that.
Right.
And then whatever was said or whatever he did late in the first half sort of, was everything sort of came to a head at that moment, I guess. Mm. I asked Ken DeWeese, who's one of their assistants, and filled in as the acting head coach last night because he filled in for Linder and talking to us post-game, and I asked him, if he got any explanation from the refs as to what Linder specifically did or said to get those back-to-back tees and get tossed, and he said that they never got an explanation. So, I don't know if they heard what he said, but mm-hmm. It's like outside of the referee and Jeff, I don't know if anybody really knows what was said or what he did, but apparently it was enough to get him an early exit and an early shower. But it's easy to look at New Mexico's record and particularly everything they've had to deal with this year and say, man, you struggled to beat, that bad of a team. You had to go to overtime to beat them. But considering Wyoming, as at least lately in conference play, it hasn't been that great for them either. Again, came in losing 4 straight games. Everybody's sort of dealing with this weather situation. You're having to go to I guess technically the road team, playing on a neutral floor. And just the way this season has gone amid the pandemic, I think it would have been really easy for Wyoming, particularly when you lose your coach. New Mexico opens the second half on a 20-9 run and takes a 7-point lead, which matched their largest lead of the entire game. I think it would have been easy for even Wyoming to just be like, just sort of throw in the towel. But, they end up rallying from a couple of different 7-point deficits, have 6 players scoring double figures. It's the most they've had in a game all season. And to at least force overtime and then to dominate the overtime period, just with everything going on, I still think that's a pretty good win for Wyoming, the way they pulled it out.
Yeah. And I mean, as big of a step forward as it seems that they've taken this year, I still don't think the program's at a place where you take any conference win for granted, no matter what the record of the team opposite you is or whatever hurdles they've had this season. So, you've got to actually go out and win them, even if it is a team that's 1-12 right now in conference play. And, those I know they, didn't pull out the regulation win, with the last possession, but those kind of end-of-game scenarios are always super valuable experience for a young team. So, to play in a weird environment like that, in a kind of neutral site, but on the road, to have, the challenge of getting in late and then having your coach not on your sideline, that's like you said, good that they could survive that, but B, that's good maturity for them going forward, for a pretty young team. So, I mean, with them being on the Air Force Academy, is it possible that, like, Linder's, his shirt wasn't tucked in all the way, or, like, did he have some facial hair you're not allowed to have? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that was the issue, I guess he probably wouldn't even been allowed in the arena, But side note to that, too, I'm checking with Wyoming just to confirm this, but I don't believe there's any further punishment in terms of game time that Jeff will have to miss. I don't think that extends past one game, so I'm pretty sure he's going to be back on the sideline coaching in the series finale on Friday. But it was interesting, in this game, Wyoming hit 13 threes. Which obviously helped, and they can shoot. That's sort of what they do. But I think the biggest difference in this game and what allowed them to pull it out was the fact that they held their own on the glass. I mean, they still finished. They still lost the rebounding battle technically. They finished -4, but for them to hold their own against a New Mexico team that came into this game as the top offensive rebounding team in the conference. That I think that says a lot to. Sort of the effort and sort of the want to that Wyoming had there in the second half to not let that thing get away from them. When they were trailing by 7 and were on the verge of New Mexico sort of pulling away and putting that thing away. But Wyoming pulled down a season high 13 offensive rebounds and led to 12 second chance points. So gave themselves all sorts of second and third opportunities to score and really took advantage of those. And a big night for Hunter Thompson, who's really been struggling. Has been an extended shooting slump for really the entirety of the conference season. I mean, he had in their conference opening win at Fresno State back in early January, he went off for 22 points and he hit 7 3-pointers. And since that time, he had not scored more than 6 points in a game. And came back and finished 5 of 8 from the floor, knocked down 4 threes, had 14 points, and even pulled down 5 rebounds, which for anybody that's followed Wyoming the last few years knows that's a pretty big number for Hunter. And that's something that this team needs. And do I think like Hunter Thompson's lack of scoring and this shooting slump is the reason that Wyoming has struggled so much, for most of the conference season? No, I don't, because again, I mean, that whether he's hitting shots or not has nothing to do with what you do on the defensive end, and for them to continue to allow teams to shoot better than 50% from the floor. That's obviously been the most glaring issue, but last night they hold New Mexico to around 43%, which Jeff Linders has said, during this season that, if we can just hold teams to under 50% with the way that we can score and the way we can shoot, we like our chances. And sure enough, they did that and got the most balanced offensive performance that they've gotten all season to pull that out. But yeah, I mean, for them to show progress, I think on the defensive end and particularly on the glass in that game, again considering the matchup that they win, I think that's a good sign for them as they try to finish this regular season strong.
Yeah, and with the San Jose State series coming up after that, that's 2 more potentially winnable games. And I know we've talked before about probably the final standings aren't necessarily the end-all be-all for this team this year. If you can potentially finish out of the bottom 4 with a few wins down the stretch here, I think that's something you can live with. Can you remind me, will the Utah State series, is there any chance they will reschedule that, or is that pretty much off the books at this point?
That's a good question, because they've only got, assuming that they actually play the San Jose series next week, they've only got 1 week before the Mountain West tournament starts, or supposed to start, and so they've got 2 series that they have to make up. Yeah, UNLV too. So I mean, at this point, I only see one of those being made up. Again, assuming that they play the San Jose series next week and don't have another open week where they could do that. But you also, it's not just Wyoming. You've got to line up the schedule with UNLV or Utah State. And, I just wonder, with so many of these series being postponed, because you've seen it for, almost every week of the conference season, there's been a series postponed or canceled. And with the fact that they have to, or, they say that they're going to work to make up all of these, I start wondering, are they going to make up or just do away with this series where you have a one of the top teams or one of those NCAA tournament hopeful teams that we've talked about playing a lesser, a team in the bottom third of the standings? Are they just going to make up the games where you have 2 good teams playing each other, rather than risk if you're the conference and you're looking out and trying to protect yourself and protect the teams that have a chance to make the NCAA tournament? Are they just going to do away with the series with the good teams against the bad teams, so to speak?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch, because I doubt the conference is ever going to come out and say that, but that could very well play into do they want to have Utah State play 2 games against Wyoming, as opposed to, okay, Wyoming, why don't you just go play those 2 UNLV games and not screw up one of our top 3 teams?
Yeah, because I think Colorado State and Utah State series is one that was recently postponed. So, there's not enough time in the schedule where all these teams can make up multiple series. So you're going to have to pick and choose.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but as far as Wyoming goes, now they'll look for the sweep. I think it would just be, if they could pull it off on Friday in the rematch, I think it'd be only their second sweep of the conference season. They swept Nevada. So I might be missing one. I'd have to go back and look, but I think it would. I think this is just a chance for just their second sweep. So something that's on the table for the Cowboys on Friday. Then switching a little bit to the women's side, they could possibly go an entire month without playing a game, because the Cowgirls just had their series against New Mexico this week postponed. And then they were originally scheduled to finish the conference slate against San Jose State next week, but San Jose State's women's team has opted out of the rest of the season. So those 2 games are off. I guess depending on maybe New Mexico's schedule next week, because I'm assuming New Mexico has 2 games scheduled, because San Jose is the only team on the women's side that's opted out. So New Mexico's got games that it has to play next week. So I don't know maybe if the series against New Mexico will be made up or not, but with that series for the women being postponed this week, they could possibly go nearly a whole month until they play another game in the Mountain West tournament, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's not ideal way to ramp up into your postseason.
Yeah. So and they're coming off a sweep of Utah State. And that got them back to 500 in conference play. They would have to, win the conference tournament too at this point to get the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. But yeah, that's to have a whole month possibly to wait to have to play a game. That's gotta. You mentioned it not being ideal, but that's a long time, man, and especially during the pandemic where this is becoming as much mental for some of these players as physical. That's got to take a toll, you would think, right?
Yeah, and I know, like you said, they needed those wins to get back up to 500, but they're a team that, just looking at their schedule, it doesn't seem like they have a single loss by double digits in the conference slate, and if you're playing that many competitive games, you'd sure like to get out there a little bit more and move up those standings. So it's got to be eating at them a little bit. And I don't even know what you do when you have that long of a time off. I guess you just practice and practice and practice. But you never know with that team in Vegas or in the conference tournament. They could have a run in them.
Yeah. Did you see, by the way, where the America East Conference has just changed its whole conference tournament format?
No, I had not.
Yeah, so basically they're ending their regular season at the end of this week, I believe, and starting their conference tournament on campus sites, which is normally what that conference does anyway, but they're basically spreading it out over 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. Basically splitting their teams up into pods. So I know we had a whole conversation on that last week, but yeah, it's just going to be interesting to see what all these teams end up doing. And I certainly don't think that's the last conference that'll end up making some changes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'll be a little interesting to look back one day on, all the sports that happened during this pandemic era, and if there are any kind of larger trends that become apparent after the fact, as far as did more experienced teams tend to do better? Did fewer upsets happen or whatever? I always thought when, we were in the sports desert last year and nothing was happening, I was like, I bet when games come back, Vegas is going to be really bad at predicting stuff, just because there are going to be so many weird variables. And it sounds like I actually heard that it's almost been the opposite, which is odd that they've been even better at predicting. And you think about the two football championships. Everything weird that's happened, it still ended up with Tom Brady and Alabama winning. It's kind of like the predictable people and teams and programs who know how to win. Were able to survive all the weirdness of everything. And I don't know. It's in a lot of ways it feels like not. I know people joke that the current seasons are fake. Basically, none of this counts. It's all so weird. There's no fans. They're doing weird scheduling things, but. Obviously, it matters in the moment to the players and the coaches, but it's just there's so much weirdness going on. It's kind of sometimes hard to evaluate what's happening. My hockey team just had to play 7 games in a row against the Arizona Coyotes, and somehow did not win most of them, despite Arizona being terrible. It's a weird time for sports in general, and you certainly have sympathy for these players sitting out for a month, but I guess hey, at least you're potentially playing another game come March.
Yeah. Wait, are they the Arizona Coyotes? They used to be the Phoenix Coyotes. Has that changed?
Yeah, they changed their name, I believe, because they're probably playing Glendale or something. But yeah, my Blues had been basically winning all their games. Then suddenly it's like, hey, here's 7 games in a row against a terrible team, and they forgot how to win a game.
Yeah.
So that's 2021 for you.
Well, it also shows you how much I keep up with the NHL. So
Well, yeah, there's going to be this team in Seattle called the Kraken.
I do know that just because their logo and everything was really awesome when they announced that. But yeah I was gonna say I don't know if Vegas has ever been mistaken as being bad at picking games. Like that, I don't, dude. I still don't. I'll never really understand that. But those casinos out there don't build themselves, so
that's true.
Yeah. But yeah,
it's because it's all rigged. It's all very fake, and teams, throw games. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. All right, Brandon, we can go ahead and take a break there, and when we come back, we'll transition to football and dive a little bit more into what Wyoming's offense might look like under new offensive coordinator Tim Polasek.
Yep.
Welcome back into the postcast. Now we're going to talk a little football and just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into what new offensive coordinator Tim Polasek might bring to Wyoming's offense and what it might look like. Because, and I know we talked about some of this last week, but I mentioned I was still going back and looking, at some stuff that he did when he was the offensive coordinator during his 3 years at North Dakota State. So I've done that now, and I actually wrote a piece for last weekend's paper that's online too at trib.com and pokesauthority.com for any of you that might want to check that out. There were a couple things just going back and watching some of the game tape from some of the games of his when he was the OC there that really stuck out to me. And the first one really is distribution and formations that he ran there. And when I talk about distribution, it seemed like he really got everybody involved in the offense. I mean, they were just as likely to throw to a running back and fullback as they were a tight end or a receiver. And I know Wyoming obviously has done some of that. They throw to their running backs a lot too. Xavier Valade is actually one of their better proven pass catchers at this point that's still on the roster. But it just seems like going back and watching some of the film that you just never know exactly where the ball is going to go on any given snap. And in terms of formations, I know Wyoming also, they run a lot of different formations and personnel packages, or they did in Brent Vigen's offense. But it just seems like under Tim, and we haven't been able to talk to him yet. He has not been made available to the local media since he was hired as Wyoming's OC yet. So haven't been able to talk to him, and ask him questions about exactly what his ideas are and what he might add, since he was the play caller at NDSU. But just looks like they run a lot of different formations, but and run the same play out of that. So they don't always give you the same look. So I think that might be something that might be a little bit different than what Wyoming did under Brent Vigen. But also the second impression that I really got, or that stood out to me watching the film, is just how much the quarterbacks were involved in the running game with Carson Wentz and Easton Stick, the quarterbacks he had there at NDSU. Each season that he was there, the quarterbacks were among their top 3 rushers on the team, and they did it some out of empty sets, which is something, Brandon, You might can speak to this too, having, covered that offense when Josh Allen was here, but I don't recall hardly ever seeing Wyoming get in an empty set, which is, just the quarterback and no running backs back there with them. At the least, usually they would operate out of 11 personnel where they at least had one running back and one tight end. But they ran the ball a lot out of empty sets, but they didn't get in empty sets just to set up the run, just to spread, try to spread out the defense and create run lanes for the quarterback. They also passed out of that, which is something I don't know if I've ever seen Wyoming do over the last 2 seasons and 2+ seasons. So, I think some different wrinkles in that aspect. And like I said, you might can recall a time where they went empty. I'm struggling to remember a time where they actually did that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure someone will dig something up and prove me wrong, but it definitely doesn't seem like something that I can recall them doing much of it at all. Yeah, I'm trying to think back, but I mean, it's always definitely been an offense that has somebody in the backfield, and they're obviously one of the fewer and fewer programs that utilize a fullback in addition to a tailback. So yeah, that's to me that would be a very new look for that offense.
Yeah, it's and one thing that I'm interested in though going forward is to see, but because you obviously have the personnel still to do that at Wyoming with Sean Chambers, who's is probably the best running quarterback in the Mountain West. But with his injury history, I do wonder exactly how much they are going to implement that, because I asked Craig Bowl at the beginning of the offseason, are they going to use him as much and expose him as much, given the fact he is yet to get through a full season healthy. And Craig basically said that they've got to develop him as a quarterback and develop his passing ability to where they don't have to be as reliant on the quarterback run to move the ball. So they've got to improve that area so that they can not be as predictable and as one-dimensional with the quarterback running game as they've been at times. But he's too electric of a runner to just completely wipe that out of the playbook.
Right.
I mean, when you got a quarterback that can, as he proved in the Missouri game a couple of years ago, sorry, Brandon, but like when you got a quarterback that can rip off a 75-yard touchdown run and provide instant offense that way, you're not going to completely throw it out. I do wonder, though, going forward exactly how much they're going to use him in the running game, because they use Carson Wentz and Easton Stick a lot in the running game. I should say Tim Polasek did when he was the OC there at NDSU. I mean, those are two really athletic guys, and I'm not sure people understood at the time, when Carson Wentz was there, just how athletic he was, because he was this big burly 6'5", 6'6", 245-pound guy. That most people thought just had the big arm, but I think a lot sort of like Josh Allen in the Josh Allen mold. He's a lot more athletic than people sort of gave him credit for when he was coming out in the draft. But they used them a lot, in similar ways in zone reads, read options. But so you wonder exactly maybe what that's going to look like at Wyoming, and how often they're going to use him, just from the simple point that they're trying to get him through a full season healthy.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things. I wonder if there is a perfect answer, because ultimately, if you are going to use the guy's legs, you're also going to put him in a spot where it's going to take some hits. And I mean, obviously, the more you can balance your offense, the fewer hits in theory he takes, when they have to respect that passing game more and more. But at the end of the day, it's a tricky balance to make use of that skill and not put him in a situation where he's gonna take some contact. And I know he's he expects to. He's a quarterback who knows how to run. I'm sure he's willing to take those hits, but I don't think it's a coincidence that he's had 3 season-ending injuries and that he's played this kind of role in the offense so far. I mean, it is definitely some bad luck to it, but when you put him in that position that many times, the chances go up for something going wrong. So, I mean, I wonder a little bit, and I don't have an answer, if there's maybe types of runs you could look at that maybe, if you're getting them on the edge a little bit more instead of running them straight up the gut, if
right.
that gives them a better opportunity to, pick up 6 yards and get down, rather than, you can, so you're going to run up the A-gap and pretend you're a running back for this down. I mean, that works, but again, you need to finish a season with him behind center if you really want to maximize what you can do in this offense. And I do want to note, Davis, just real quick, I reread the press release from when they hired Tim, and they spell out that it's pronounced Polasek, Pawl. So I realized that was spelled out just for you and I, the SEC grads. We should be able to say Paul. Tim Paul hasn't played anybody. So yeah, Tim Polasek. I'll try to get that right. I think I was just winging it last week.
When did I think I pronounced it wrong too last week, but when did this become the Paul Feinbaum show?
That's my name is actually Phyllis, and
so wait, Brandon, that's just an alias. Brandon Foster, that's an alias.
Yeah, where's Phyllis from? Alabama.
Alabama somewhere, yeah.
Yeah,
but I can't remember.
Did she die? It's been I have not listened to the Paul show. I just remember there being some vaguely Tom Rinaldi heartfelt feature on Phyllis a couple of years back.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, I am originally from Alabama and grew up there in Mississippi, and I don't even listen to that show. I didn't listen to that show growing up, and I certainly don't listen to it now. But I don't know. What were we even talking about?
Yeah, I don't know. I got us very off topic. Football, I think, offense, something like that.
This is all your fault.
One thing I do wonder, Davis, that you mentioned and I definitely recommend everyone check out the article, because you've got some very helpful videos in there too, and really a cool look at some of these things you're talking about as far as different looks. One thing that struck me. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say. Technically, they're GIFs or GIFs.
GIFs, yeah.
I still, to this day, don't know how to pronounce that. But if you do, go ahead.
I say GIF because the dude who invented it said that it's pronounced GIF, and I feel like GIF. And I feel like if you invent something, you should get to and everyone uses it, you should get to tell people how to say it. But every time I say GIF, people yell at me. So I think GIF is the way to go if you want to be normal. But
I do too, because you have Jif peanut butter, and that's spelled with a J, and that's pronounced Jif. So I'm like, well,
that's true.
If the other one starts with a G, it can't be pronounced the same.
I mean, I guess those are the only two English words that are pronounced the same but spelled differently.
Sorry.
Found
okay. Go ahead.
But yeah, no, so yeah, fancy GIFs in there, or GIFs depending on your preference. But, I think one that really jumped out to me was this diamond formation in there where they had, what was it, 3 running backs back with either Wentz or Stick, and they ran to the short side of the field. Everybody bit on the running backs going to the short side, and actually I think Stick just ran up the middle for a super long touchdown. Not necessarily the QB run portion of that, but I wonder if Polasek will bring an element of using multiple running backs a little bit more in the backfield that aren't, just a tailback and a fullback. I don't feel like when I was on the beat, they did a whole lot of putting 2 ball carriers back there. They obviously use a fullback a lot, but not. They weren't handing the ball off very much to their fullbacks. So when you got 2 guys back there and you don't know which one's going to get the handoff, if either of them, plus obviously Chambers who can run it, that adds a split second that the defense has to watch all 3 of them. I mean, kind of reminds me of some of what New Mexico and those more option-based teams have done over the years. But when you've got, like we've talked about, so many running backs and so much depth there, I wonder if they'll do a little bit more of, let's just get crazy and throw Valladay, Smith, and why am I forgetting all the running backs' names? But throw 3 tailbacks back there as well as Chambers, and then just do a little play action. And I don't know. I feel like you could get creative, or I would be interested to see that at least. I'm certainly not an offensive coordinator, but that was a play that stuck out to me.
No, yeah, that's sort of what I'm talking about in terms of formations too, where you have 2 or even 3 backs in the backfield. So there's so many things you can do off of that, right? Like you mentioned, included the GIF or GIF, however you pronounce it, of obviously Easton Stick keeping on a read play basically and running up the gut for really long touchdown after the entire defense basically went with the run action to the short side of the field. But then you can play action off of that. You can use the wheel route to the running back out of the backfield is an undefeated play in football. So and speaking of that, I don't want to give away too much of that article, what's in it, because obviously I want people to go check it out and read it. But there's also, I did include a play in there too of a play where they were closer to the goal line against Iowa and their upset win over Iowa back in 2016, where they had a split back formation, faked to the running back and hit another running back on the wheel route out of the backfield wide open for a touchdown late in that game. So yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can use with that, and that's not to say that Wyoming didn't do that under Brent Vigen, because they were. I specifically remember one time where they used the diamond formation or 3 backs in the backfield and ran play action and actually hit a really long pass play to Xavier Valladay out of the backfield against Nevada in 2019. I think, if I'm not mistaken on which game that was, but I know they've done some of that in the past. I think you're going to see a little bit more variation in terms of how many different things that they do out of their formations and how many different things they can do. And I think you might, I was mentioning that touchdown play that NDSU had against Iowa. I think you might, that was something else I think that sort of stuck out too, was how different some of their play calling and how willing Polasek was to mix it up closer to the goal line, because Wyoming, in the past, usually once they get inside the red zone, I mean, they're trying to pound that thing in there. I mean, they had 1 passing touchdown all of last season. So I mean, once they get close to the goal line, usually they've been very, very predictable in some of the plays that they've called. I think you might see a little bit more variation in the red zone under Polasek, but I'll be interested to talk to him just to see if he plans to stick with some of the same things, or what maybe different wrinkles or different ideas that he's thinking about in terms of the offense that he wants to bring to Wyoming, or the different variations of maybe what he's run in the past. But going back to Sean Chambers and the point you were sort of making, we were talking about in terms of how often he might run the ball. But I also think that's a reason why the passing game under him needs to develop, because if you can make defenses respect the pass, and you don't have 9-10 defenders constantly crowding the line of scrimmage, that can open up so much more in running lanes, and make you more unpredictable in terms of when you might want to dial up a quarterback draw out of an empty set. If you're able to complete passes down the field out of the empty set, well, obviously teams can't sit there and say, well, they're going empty set, that means they're just going to run the ball, because they can't complete passes out of it. Then your offense just becomes that much more multi-dimensional in what you can do.
Yeah, and I want to go back briefly to one thing you mentioned earlier too, is getting everybody involved in the offense, including tight ends. And I mean, I'm not sure that there's ever been a offensive coordinator who hasn't said that they want to get the tight ends involved more in the offense. I mean, it feels like the equivalent of a new defensive coordinator telling you at the press conference they're going to play aggressive. It's like, okay, cool, congrats. Right. But like, I would be intrigued to see that with this offense, because over the last 4 years or so, they've recruited these just absolutely giant dudes at tight end, and while they were recruiting them, it was kind of like, man, these guys are all like 6'7". the end game here? Is this are they just stacking up on like red zone threats where they're going to have three guys out there that you just can't cover? And now, my guess, the way the next few years went, is they basically just wanted to like add more offensive linemen, is how it's turned out. Like here's some two more giant dudes who can block even more because we're going to run the ball down your throat all game. But if they now that those tight ends do have a few years under their belt, and have more times with the jug machine or whatever, if they are able to find ways to throw some jump balls up to those 6'8" tight ends, that feels like an unexplored possibility in this offense. I mean, there just aren't that many tall human beings in the Mountain West who can go up and get that. So I'd be really interested to see if they can maybe take a little bit more advantage of that size that they have at that position.
Yeah, that's something Craig Bowles talked about this offseason too, was because the tight end production in terms of pass catching, of course, it's relative because everybody's catches have been down just simply because they haven't thrown the ball as often, over the last 2 or 3 years. But I mean, that production's tailed off at that position since Tyree Mayfield and Austin Fort left after the 2018 season. And you're right. I mean, when you have guys like Nate Wyman, Jackson Marcotte, and even Trayton Welsh is more of that hybrid, and he was technically, I guess, he was on the depth chart. He was listed as a starter, but as we all know, Wyoming, that's sort of a relative term because Wyoming usually has multiple tight ends on the field at the same time.
Right.
So, but he's that hybrid guy that's probably more of a downfield threat. He was a receiver in high school. So you've got a lot of diversity at that position, and I didn't even mention the Colin O'Brien, the kid that they recruited out of junior college last season, who goes about 6'6", and redshirted last year because I think it took him a little longer to sort of get caught up with the offense. But yeah, they have all sorts of different options at that position. And different ways that they can sort of utilize guys. I mean, you can use them as true tight ends. You can use them as H-back. You can, as I mentioned with Trayton Welch and maybe even Parker Christensen, those are guys who you can even split out in the slot, let them operate more as a receiver. So yeah, I would expect some of that in Polasek's offense because even Craig Bull said that that's a position that they need to get more involved in the passing game, and they have sort of the versatility where they can use different guys in different ways. So it's going to be interesting to see how they ultimately end up using everybody and how much they end up using the passing game in general after what we've seen the last few years.
Yeah, it'd be I don't know, if I were playing Madden, I would just throw it up to those guys all the time. But that's why I'm not an offensive coordinator. Yeah, I guess one more thing I wonder too is like I don't know that I necessarily saw a lot of it in the moving image files you embedded in your story, but
there you go.
Like, I think one thing they're gonna have to do on offense is find a way to kind of get some simplified, quick passes into the game that can build quarterback confidence. I mean, you're trying to develop these quarterbacks into more passers, and I think you're going to have to find a way to get simplified, plays that can translate to easy completions and not maybe rely on quite as much. I know Sean's been in the offense for years now, so there's some familiarity there, but I mean, it just feels like if you want to complete more passes, you need to throw some more simple plays out there. I mean, is that something that you expect that Polasek will bring, or has I guess has Bull talked much about how do you go about building up a quarterback's confidence as a passer?
Well, yeah, and Craig hasn't talked about that specifically this offseason, but I mean, you can see just from Polasek's time at NDSU, I mean, there's a lot of those where they're in 12 personnel or even just 11 personnel where, you're booting to a tight end where, he's coming off the end, or if you have two tight ends where the backside tight end is dragging all the way across the field. But so, I would expect a lot of that. Particularly when you run the ball as well as they do, and you have defenses flowing with the running back as much and as hard as they do, those bootlegs, those waggles, those ought to be wide open.
Yeah.
And those are easy passes that Polasek implemented in that offense at NDSU, and I would fully expect them to continue doing at Wyoming.
Cool. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they look like on offense against a Brent Vegan defense. Never been able to say that before.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I'm more intrigued with the Brent Vegan offense against Wyoming's defense.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, so hopefully soon the media will be able to talk to Tim. Since now that he's been hired at Wyoming and is here in an official capacity. I don't know when that might be, but we've inquired about it, so hopefully it'll be soon. But be interesting to see what it all looks like once they start spring ball. Again, that is tentatively scheduled to start at the beginning or mid-April, sometime around there, with their spring game tentatively scheduled for May 8th. So, I guess we'll start getting some answers this spring, assuming that, of course, all this spring football actually happens, which, by the way, FCS football is about to start.
That's true.
So,
how does that, is Vegan going to, wait, what? How does that even work? I have not paid close enough attention.
Yeah.
Are half the FCS teams playing in the spring?
I think not all FCS conferences are playing in the spring, but some of them are. So that's going to be weird to turn on your TV on a random Saturday in March or April and see a college football game being played.
Right. Yeah, man. I mean, without the XFL, we need it, right?
No, I'm ready for the XFL to come back, man. It's got to make another comeback.
Oh yeah.
It's the league that dies but never actually dies. So
it was The Rock bought it out, right? Is that right?
I have no idea. I haven't kept up with that.
I think he did. Bring back the Battlehawks. Caw. That's my team.
All right, Brandon, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up there. As always, tune into trib.com, pokesauthority.com for all of our coverage. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Pokes Authority. You can follow me on Twitter at Davis E. Potter. You can follow Brandon on Twitter at bfoster91. This podcast is on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Omni, so be sure to subscribe, download it, and give us that 5-star rating. Brandon, appreciate you joining me as always. Thank all of you guys for listening, and we will talk to you again next week.
Cool. We'll see you then.